Hi, welcome back to yet another CSGO map analysis video. This is Feast by poLemin, and this is Ape, your matchmaking teammate. So, we got some scooters. Not the grandest way to stop us from leaving spawn, but at the very least, it is a way, and I like the idea of terrorists riding in on scooters, so there's a little bit of comedy associated with that. I like it. This is indeed a bomb defusal site map thing, noun, and we are in T-spawn. I'm actually quite fond of this map in terms of how the gameplay has played out in my own tests. Quite fond of that. And I want to share it with you guys. So as we pass by this bike, which is much inferior to our scooters, we're going to head towards A. And this map has a nice variety of walkways, and I feel like maybe one of the more difficult things that new players will grapple with is the interior areas being fairly common, and maybe not immediately being able to piece together how they flank together. But thankfully, they're only really going to be shown up in mid-round scenarios, or like straight up rushes, it seems. Also, don't mind my text-to-speech. So this is sort of the rotation to A. And as you saw earlier here, you could go off to mid from A, which is the main path to A, or to mid rather, from T-spawn. You can go to mid if you take a right. Otherwise, you can head on over here. And you're faced with yet another choice, which is well-placed, I think, because you're either taking a turn to make your choice, or you're running right in here, and that's your choice. Well, a lot of I think newer mappers, or mappers who have just not really mastered the craft as well as poLemin presumably has, given the offering he has given us here, or she, I don't know, they. poLemin, it's like poLeman, I feel like, so man, you know? But either way, poLemin has given us quite an interesting map here, and I think you can tell that they've thought about how players are going to take sites and how players are going to take rotations and make movements across the map, based on the fact that they have positioned a choice at the same time that you're going to make a turn otherwise. So like they take the most straightforward approach to A, and as you turn to make that approach, you're also able to make a different decision if you want. I mean, you're still turning, but you could go a little bit further and then make that choice. And so the idea is, as the one pathway diverges, another one opens up as well. And so you get to feel like you're making perhaps a more grand choice than you actually are. Like, you feel a little bit more empowered as the player, I think, in general. There's also a lot of spots on the map that are like this. Not necessarily with this weird bleeding, but where you're stuck trying to jump around, and it seems like some clipping updates need to be had. I don't think there's any otherwise, but it looks like I can self-boost on something over here. But I like the fact that that exists. I mean, a lot of the times you've seen me criticize maps for having areas where there's a lot of long corridors and not really a whole lot of decision-making for players to make. And in this case, poLemin avoids that just by virtue of being able to take a different corridor if you want, and the corridors themselves not being so long, as you will find out shortly. So, we'll rotate into A now. The A-bomb site has a fair bit of verticality, but nothing too crazy, and nothing completely inaccessible either. In fact, you'll notice that CTs coming from CT spawn, which is just to the right of the passageway I'm looking at over here, are able to self-boost up into this area, which answers the lower push that you were talking, or that I was talking about earlier, that you saw earlier when I was mentioning the whole different pathway that you could take. So if you do decide to go lower instead of the central path into A, the main path into A, if you will, you'll come out up here. But CTs can push that area either with a boost or simply by walking up here and nabbing themselves this nifty scooter. So that gives you a little bit of decision making as CTs, gives you a little bit of something to be wary about as Ts if you are planning on an upper take. And even if you're planning on a generic mid take, you know, if nobody goes upper to clear this area, they don't know that, you know, the rest of the T team doesn't know if a CT is standing over here, right? And they're pretty well protected. You know, they can fall back if they need to or whatever. So already you're seeing, you know, a complex element of the bomb site where both teams are able to take, you know, some element of the map in terms of map control and use it to their advantage when it comes to actually either attacking or defending a bomb site, which I think is really interesting. Also, you can stand on these boxes, which kind of reminds me of A-site cache. I think I've drawn that parallel a few too many times probably for people's liking. But the fact that you can, and again, I am really terrible at movement, guys, but I'm able to do all this, so you can too. Unfortunately, you can't stand on this, but I always say, unfortunately, you can't do this really broken OP thing. So don't take what I have to say in that particular context as, oh, that should be there. That should be something that you're allowed to do. Probably you shouldn't be able to do it, but you know. As you can see, there is a quick rotate into CT spawn by going up here. This also, I guess you'd call this A heaven or something like that, but in this heaven area, you do indeed have balcony, perhaps. You have a couple of different things that you can do to either rotate into the site, a couple of different angles you can watch that are either more or less aggressive. Now, naturally, I think the op angle that you're going to see is probably looking over here, waiting for somebody to push out upper. And so there creates this natural angle where these two elements of the map kind of line up, where you'll be peeking straight out. Now, obviously, as the CT, you also have to be careful of CT, or as a T rather, you have to be careful of CT, you have to be careful of, you know, any number of other spots, and you probably want to be doing something like this. You know, perhaps this would be where you would, if you see no enemies, then you would peek out, right? So they could either be right here, which is like a one and done kind of position if they do get spotted, or they would be right here. So you'd have to practice your muscle movement similar to peeking out of Mirage default or something, or not default, main. So there's a number of different areas that you can exploit as a CT to catch your opponent off guard. A number of off angles. You can elevate your Z a little bit by standing on here. You can obviously just drop down and play the op angle over here and get into this position before T's can challenge you. And then you can take a shot here and then reposition to take a shot over here. Obviously, you would expect some smokes to come out. So if they find a smoke lineup, and I'm pretty sure the skyboxes are fairly open in theory, but maybe I'm wrong about that. It doesn't seem like they're very far open above that, but presumably you're able to, you know, throw smoke over here. Yeah. So there's definitely a lineup that they could find for that. I mean, just the fact that this is so close to, like, it's so open. In fact, I think if you just throw it a little bit to the right, you probably get it. Otherwise, I wouldn't bug you people. But I guess you would probably line yourself up over here. Aim at the top, jump throw. Something like that will probably eventually get it. Like, I was too high there. But you could probably hit a smoke for right in here. And if they're doing that a lot, you can jump down as the opper and pick from here. You're not necessarily completely shot out of the sight. So it seems like there was some attention to detail, giving Ts and CTs tools for the trade when it comes to actually taking and holding this particular site. And once terrorists do inevitably take A at least once per game, even if you're a godlike counter-terrorist, there's still some ways that you can get back into the site. So obviously you can go the way that you were. You can rotate through mid and go the way that the terrorists came in. Either one of the two ways that they can easily make it into the site. And I'll talk about how mid control favors into that as well. But suffice it to say, you get a pretty useful approach into both bomb sites from mid, which is what you would expect out of a 3-lane map, but there's enough of interesting firefights to take when it comes to the control of mid and the way that CT is constructed around that, like the CT position and how they rotate into mid is interesting enough with the elements of Z, with how the verticality is positioned. This is the CT approach into this A area, in case you missed that. So obviously very, very easy to, you know, you spawn around here where Acheron agent is. You run in here real quick, and you know, it's probably like a 5-second rotation or something, 6-second rotation maybe, to get into position here. Whereas obviously much farther for the terrorists to get in a position to op bang you out and blow you out of the server. And this is the rotation down to middle. I'll cover that in a second though. Let's talk about B first. So if you're coming through CT, right? You spawn in CT. You're going to jump down here. Obviously, a lot of areas where you're going to see some interesting angles for either lurks, you know, picking off somebody who's rotating from one bomb site to the other. Either like a CT can hang back in B and see if they can see anybody. There's like a nice little tight angle over here that they can watch that figures out into anybody who's, I guess anybody who's over here would probably be seen, especially if they jumped onto this. But in general, you could indeed be seen as you're coming up over here. So stuff like that You can definitely make picks. You can definitely position yourself in ways that will give you advantages. And that, I think, is obviously useful, but adds a little bit of value. And the fact that there's that verticality, again, where you're actually descending into the B-bomb site, I think is neat. It's like the CTs very obviously start at the highest point of the map in terms of verticality. If you looked at a topographic map of this area, you would see CTs starting at the highest point and the terrorists starting at the lowest point, and the terrorists sort of take this climb to challenge the CTs in that sense. And I think that that theme, or just that attribute of the map, is interesting enough that it provides a lot of excuses to create some very neat firefights. So I like that. I'm pretty sure you can balance yourself on this, which is probably only useful if you have a rifle in your hand instead of an op. And you can like hold for them to come in. You can also obviously hold this. I don't think you're visible in terms of your rifle, but obviously I can't really test that easily. What else? So this rotates into mid. I'll talk about that in a second. But this is the B-bomb site, and you can only plant over here. I didn't really talk about where you can plant in the A-bomb site, but it's pretty obvious when you look at the site. I'll go back over there at some point and show that off again. But you can only plant on the lower ground. You can't plant on doodads or anything like this, right? So only on the low ground. Looks like you can plant on the stairs, but only like the last one. And that's it. So obviously you're fairly vulnerable when you are in here. If you are in here, there's like one spot in the entire area where you can sort of stick yourself in here and tuck away and hide. And even then you're very heavily exposed. You could, in theory, do this if you know the last guy is over here or something, and the last men are over in that direction, and you're not expecting a flank from either mid or the B approach, like I guess either approach from mid, I should say, because there's a mid B flank or whatever you want to call that. So you definitely have to watch out for that. But I like the fact that the bomb site, you want to take it, and then you want to scatter away from it. It's an interesting take on bomb sites in general. You don't really see that too often. I guess like Mirage B site would be the most obvious example that comes to mind immediately, is like, yeah, that's a bomb site where you want to plant and then fall back and find a good position. Whereas usually there's some cover inside the bomb site itself. Like you contrast this B bomb site with this map's A bomb site, and you can see what I'm talking about immediately. So I think that that's neat. For sure, it's one of those things that requires getting used to. And if you get used to it, then maybe you'd be able to say for sure whether or not it's a useful attribute, or it's an attribute that helps the map feels, reasonably and genuinely set apart from its peers in a positive way. I can't say for sure if it's a good attribute or a bad attribute right now, but I do think it's interesting. It definitely sort of encourages a certain set of gameplay patterns for the terrorists once they take the site. Obviously, counter-terrorists don't want to be in the site, but the caveat there is if counter-terrorists are in the site, generally speaking, that's the last place that the terrorists would look when they're clearing angles, right? They are going to come in here and they're going to check CT, they're going to check car, they're going to check, the B-wrap or whatever you want to call that area. Are they really going to check the site? Obviously they will, but odds of the counter-terrorists being there when there's almost no cover that will help them is kind of low. Like they're in one and done positions if they're in there. Whereas if they're, behind this box or something, they get a kill, they can sort of try to fall back safely into other positions. Whereas obviously it's still a little risky, but at least they can fall back into those positions. You have nowhere to fall back to if you're down here. The best you can hope for is getting a kill and then maybe some utility drops and you can run all the way over here. But good luck. So it's not even like you can fall back to another area where your team has map control. You can't. So I think that's an interesting wrinkle. Obviously, on the A-bomb site, there is cover, and that makes it a bit more favorable to take firefights, even if you can't immediately fall back to something more appropriate or more appealing as a position for retaking. But interesting dynamic, I think. We get over here, we're looking at Tintiki Street. We're looking at Truck, I imagine this will be called. A very popular spot for early action on the B-bomb site. Rotations are such that it's a bit more even to get around here, probably around here actually, the truck mirror, when the terrorists, are also in spitting distance of you, right? So this is like B long. Again, I got to be fair, I got to be true to my word here. I do think that this is quite a lengthy corridor, right? Sort of reminiscent of Ivy on Train, where you're heading towards the outer bomb site, the A-bomb site, and you have to, take a lot of steps back to, once you're in position, if you have to fall back the other way, that's a very long rotation. Now, there's a wrinkle in that you can get to mid fairly easily from this, but you have to make some noise, I think. You know, in order to do it in a timely manner anyway, you definitely have to make some noise. It is possible, I'm pretty sure, to get here with without making any noise, right? But the odds of you being able to then still be where you need to go, pretty low. Also, I'm pretty sure that this whole thing is bangable. Oh, yes it is. So you know what that means. This is middle, by the way. I wonder if the rest of the house is bangable. It looks like it is. Yeah, so this is going to be wallbang central. You know you're going to get banged if you go in there. That's the bang house. Don't go in the bang house unprepared. Anyway, this rotates all the way back out to the wrap towards A, I guess. The A main, if you will. A wrap. So, you know, this little upper area. That's sort of what I was talking about. There's also some really obviously fucked up lighting scenarios over here that should be fixed. But this is one of those things that I was mentioning when I talked about at the beginning of this analysis video. How newer players are going to struggle with, you know, interpreting all of the knickknacks, all of the nooks and crannies, all of the cover pieces, all of the dynamics of the bomb sites. It's a fairly simple layout in terms of it being mostly a 3-lane layout with some connectors. But this interior over here is going to be a little, you know, it's going to take a little getting used to. It's almost like if you put Inferno's terrorist huts, like the T-side houses that Inferno has, where there's like a kitchen and you can, you know, it sees some use, but not that much. It's like if you made a layout out of that sort of style of gameplay or style of architecture in terms of the way that it's laid out, where there's like a couple of different rooms that you can go into and, you know, the pathways kind of diverge. You know, you're not crossing a bridge, but this may as well be that bridge since considering how wall bangable it is. And people are going to find lineups and stuff for the terrorists out as well. So have no fear. But I think it's just interesting to walk through here and consider this from that angle. It's as if somebody thought that the Inferno houses could have used more gameplay space and could have used you know, more importance, so that it was actually an area of the map that was fought over, and where battles were taken, more than just where like wallbang spots were taken from, or map control and grenades were lined up from. It was actually a position of the map where you wanted to have control over. Obviously, it is terrorist-sided, but CTs will have a pretty good grasp of what the terrorists are doing, generally speaking. So I like that. I think that's a neat layout anyway. It's just going to get some taken used to, just sort of or take some getting used to, just like this lower area on the A side of the map. So if we go to mid from the terrorists' perspective, we see the CT mid being, again, raised up, just like I was talking about earlier when I was approaching the B-bomb site. You have a situation where you're looking at a map that requires a little bit of KZ, a little bit of movement in order to get where you need to go if you're trying to boost into mid. Obviously, you could also just self-boost, or you self-boost like what I just did, but you could boost your teammate if you wanted to do that instead. I don't think you can make it from here, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Yeah, maybe you could long jump it or something if that wasn't in the way. So I don't know if the developer did that deliberately to make it so that even, you know, gifted KZ players couldn't make it to this area. I think that would be fine if you wanted to move that, but maybe this is also there to stop like certain kinds of wall bangs or something. I don't really know why that would be there. Otherwise, maybe it could be moved and still serve that purpose if that was the case. It seems like a very specific thing, though. So if we're looking at it from a terrorist's perspective as he walks into middle, he can go into the wrap to B. This definitely increases the risk factor of operating at B as a CT. But otherwise, you know, you're expecting all terrorists to come in over here, which I think adds another layer of complexity, because now, as counter-terrorists, if we go all the way back to counter-terrorists, and now I'll show you the CT approach to mid again. This is the approach. You're up here looking down, and again, the terrorists are going to come out from where I just shot. So, with that being said, obviously, very quick rotation into the B-bomb site from here. I expect there to be max one player on the B-bomb site in counter-terrorist, you know, lines of scrimmage. And maybe two people are mid trying to take fights, because I can't underscore how important it is for the counter-terrorists to be able to say, you know, 1 cross, 2 cross, however many crossed. Otherwise, like if they see no activity or there's a call out from the B anchor who says, hey, they're on me, you know, then you can justify placing a player inside the bomb site itself, because then you have a bit of a crossfire setup where you can have your opper holding this angle over here or getting aggressive and peeking over here. I'm pretty sure that you're visible from this angle, but let me see. It looks like you can just skate by without being visible if you hug the right side, right? But again, the opera could just hold this angle, be pretty safe in general. Obviously, his back is exposed, but he's pretty safe in general. And then another rifler can come out from over here and hold something like this, or maybe even go a little bit further and hang out at this box and thus support his teammate, right? He can jiggle like this, and then the A rotates can come in. That's what I think will happen, because of the fact that in order to siege the B-bomb site without the counter-terrorists knowing that it's coming, they all have to go the truck route that I was just talking about earlier. They all have to come in from this angle. And to me, this makes this site very, very simple for the counter-terrorists to hold with just one player, because the other two, who would in theory be on the B-bomb site side, you know, one of them can just be playing up here with an op angle. The other one could be down in the lower area, ready to rotate to either A or jump up and rotate to B if necessary, right? So the rifler could be down here, and the opper could be up here, and they could both be able to rotate. Meanwhile, if you have a double op set up, you'd stick the other op over here in the balcony area of A, and the other rifler would either play like a back position like this. You know, maybe he would just throw a smoke and then try to hold it or something like that. You know, so that he's safe from this approach, so that his opper can have first contact with anybody who's going the A upper area. And so that's just sort of what I'm imagining anyway in terms of a line of scrimmage. It seems like a very, very powerful sort of answer, something that the terrorists will have a tough time answering, but it's a very, very powerful way to neutralize any threat that the B-bomb site is under. So I do think that the A-bomb site will see more action as the players become more familiar with the map. However, I also think that mid will be treated as a contact point that is just about as important, if not more important, than taking a site, because of the amount, you know, I've said this in a lot of maps, but generally speaking, when you take mid, or when you take something that allows you to rotate rather safely, you are talking about a situation where you can threaten multiple parts of the map, and the counter-terrorists or whoever's defending whatever spot has to account for that when they're, you know, establishing their defense and communicating. So that's obviously fairly important. You have to keep that in mind. Now, that being said, you're still looking at a situation where terrorists have options, despite the fact that they can rush B all 5 down truck, or they can, you know, try to pick mid. They can, you know, throw utility. I'm pretty sure you can throw utility above this area. Let's see. Yeah, seems like that's possible. So obviously they have good luck even finding that lineup, but it's not useful anyway. So you'd, you know, probably want to wall yourself in over here. Let's try that one, see what happens. Probably not anything useful. Not quite. But I'm sure you could find a lineup that smokes this area off. And when terrorists have the ability to do that through utility, yes, they can neutralize some of the positions I'm talking about. But I do think that that will be the ideal counter-terrorist setup when you're coming into this map. You're talking about a situation where you can see for yourself when the terrorists are coming in. This might end up even evolving sort of like the nuke secret take, where on nuke you're trying to go to the lower bomb site, or at least threaten that you have the ability to. So you just throw smokes down here and down here and block off CT vision of you as you approach, right? Because if I'm on the CT side, I can't see you. I would have to, even if I boosted over, I don't think I'd be able to see you. I would have to have like a really insanely high vantage point that's not feasible just to see you crossing from this. So I can imagine people doing this just so that they can threaten multiple people on B. Now, whether or not that's a fake, obviously the terrorists would have to figure that out, or the counter-terrorists would have to figure that out, rather. And again, it's fairly trivial as long as you're confident in your movement to be able to jump up here. There are some hilarious clips from some fraud nights. The last fraud night before the video, before the recording date of this video, has some pretty funny clips of me and other people failing that jump. But I think it's really important in terms of how that's set up. So in general, I'm really looking forward to seeing how mid fights alone end up playing in this area. I think that's going to be really, really cool. Not only the tactical depth that you can just smoke it off and then rotate through, or not rotate through if you so choose. Obviously, that rewards people who are willing to stay in the map and find some lineups. But you're also dealing with a fair number of situations where, as counter-terrorists, you've got a lot of tools. You got to figure out what tools you want to take and what tools you want to leave, and how you want to allocate your defense and how you want to respond to terrorists. I think that's really how counter-terrorist maps, or CSGO maps rather, should be done. Is if you're trying to make an even map anyway, a map where there's, roughly speaking, a 50% chance for CTs to win around and Ts to win around based on stats. Now, obviously, I would never encourage you to chase stats per se. I think you have some idea of what you want the map to be, and then players figure out what that map actually is, and you decide based on what players find whether or not that's what you want to keep it at, and you balance around that. But you really shouldn't be balancing around what you originally wanted necessarily in terms of map balance, just because that's really not how things work. That's how you get situations like Nuke, where for a while they were changing stuff to, in theory, be like more CT-sided, I think it was, or more T-sided or something. Maybe it wasn't Nuke. Maybe I'm thinking of Inferno. But either way, there were some map changes where like the vents were used by the counter-terrorists as well as the terrorists, and the map size or map side percent win rate did not actually change positively for what Valve was looking for in that particular case. I wish I could remember the exact example. It would make the analogy a little bit stronger there, but I'm pretty sure it was the Nuke vent change way back when. And in a situation like that, you don't really have, again, you don't know how something is going to be used until you see it used at the highest level. And of course, nobody has real access to that unless you're FMPone. And even then your map doesn't get added, unfortunately. So no, not for longer than a couple weeks anyway. But I just think it's very, very interesting to me, just the way that this map is set up. I would really like to see some high-level Counter-Strike be played on this, because I think it has the kind of construction that you would want out of a map that is intended to be, skill testing, even based on sides, but, obviously allowing tactical depth, allowing raw aim, allowing all these things that we love Counter-Strike in terms of, watching it as an esport, watching it as a competitive game, as a discipline. I think it's, there's a lot of really interesting ideas at play here, and I would really like to see stuff like that happen, because if you have a situation where both teams have plenty of tools and the offensive team has, more tools in terms of number of tools, more tools perhaps even in terms of effective strategies, and the way that the defending team responds dictates how well they perform. I mean, in essence, that describes every Counter-Strike round, but obviously, certain maps lend themselves better and worse to that kind of gameplay, to that kind of comparison even. And I think when you look at this map, I see a lot of possibilities. Sure, there's probably some cover that will end up needing to be moved around or reworked in some way. I didn't even really talk about this passageway here, this market passageway, perhaps you could call it, register, right? This just is another way that you can lead into the A-bomb site. So this is where you can threaten the A-bomb site a little bit easier if you take mid control, which is another reason why just taking mid control doesn't guarantee that they're going B. However, taking deep mid control means that they are a little bit more likely to go A in theory, and if not, you'll hear them make the KZ jump. So, although even if they do end up doing this, they can just rotate through CT and backstab in the balcony position that I was talking about earlier with the Opper. So yeah, there's a lot here. There's a lot to go off of here. And it's, even that being said, it's a map that isn't that complex in terms of how it's laid out. Or if you just took the map image into Photoshop and you try to dissect it, it would seem like, oh, it's kind of straightforward. But there's a lot of really interesting wrinkles put into the map layout. So art needs to be, have another look taken at for sure. That's probably one of the reasons why this is an honorable mention and not actually accepted into the contest, because they didn't care as much as I do about gameplay. But honestly, this is up there with Basalt in terms of interesting ideas. It's probably better in terms of the tried and true mechanics of what makes Counter-Strike maps fun to play for most people. This map is probably more true to form and less experimental, we could say, than Basalt, where Basalt has that interesting middle that is almost more important than a bomb site. Whereas this, sure, middle is important, but not as important as a bomb site. So, yeah, I think this map tends to be, in general, the gameplay that you're going to see on this map is a bit more like what you've seen in other maps. You can self-boost up here, you can take a lot of fights in mid, you can fall back, there's lots of room for you to use utility in an aggressive and in a defensive manner, on really both sides, I would say. And yeah, nice pixel art. So that's it. Play this map. Get it. Bye.